I've just recently had my hernia repaired, and that now comes with a number of limitations for me, and that involves not lifting anything more than 5 kilos for the next 6 weeks. That will be interesting. Certainly when I'm sitting in the workshop thinking of things that I might do, I've then got to look and say, well, you know, I really shouldn't be lifting this or doing that, and so on. Anyway, I'm still going to work on the bonnet. There are things I can do in terms of just with a little bit of help, which I'll have to call on just to get the bonnet panels in position and just get a general look-see as to how the fit is. I can do that. Beyond that, I'll just have to be very careful. But anyway, it just means I've got to rearrange things. I'll probably do other things involved around fittings for the bonnet, so there are a few things I can do there. So hopefully that time will go quickly and I can get back on to basically no limitations and sit here with a hammer and whatever and get into the work. So anyway, just bear with me. So might be a little bit of disruption in terms of what I intended to do, but I'll get back onto it fairly quickly. Now these brackets hold the bonnet locating peg, which actually goes through there. This piece is snapped off. This is the, I'd say this is the right hand side one, and it has a few problems apart from the piece missing. It does have accident damage. You might not be able to see that, but it's bent, so it's bent down that way. Also, where the peg goes through the bracket itself, it should be flush at the back. It's not, and it's actually recessed in there, and the small amount of weld that was put on here is cracked. So there's a few repairs to do to this. One is to straighten the rear of the bracket, get that back so it's square instead of bent like it is, and the other is to repair the peg holder on the top there. Now this is 2mm steel. I have the right thickness of steel here in the workshop. That's not a problem. So I'll address that second. First thing is to straighten this up. If I can't straighten it, the whole thing is useless. I'm pretty sure I can. I'll take it easy and gradually get this bend out of the structure. I should be able to do it without too much difficulty, but first of all I need to remove what's left of the weld so this can move quite freely, and once I've got it straight, I'll then add a piece of weld there just to locate or to hold the located, I'll call this a peg as well. That needs to be located and held. Also on this one there is a little bit of wear in there. Now I don't mind some wear, but this is recessed more than I believe is acceptable. So I'll fill that with weld once I've got all this back into shape. So this one's the easier one. I'll start on the easier one first and then progress on to the other side, which is showing similar problems. Obviously the top end is snapped off. This one is bent a lot more. You can see that it's bent much more, so it's going to take a lot more effort to get it back. This one, the weld is not cracked there, so that's held okay. I need to straighten this rear end. Also on here, there is wear in that surface in there. This one is actually worse than the other side. I mean, that is worn, and I think I need to fill that, but this one is a lot deeper, so that definitely needs to be repaired in there. Anyway, first things first, straighten the bracket itself and then do more repairs from there. The right hand bracket here I've been able to actually straighten out. It was only bent on this side. It was an even bend, not from the area here, but part way through the plate here. So it was just a case of putting it on the anvil here and straightening that out. I of course did remove the little tack weld in here, ground that out, so that meant it was easier to knock this back in place, because it actually had to push it back onto the pin, which it wasn't doing. So that's now right. Still haven't addressed that, but I'll address that when I work out how I'm going to address that. This one I'm about to start. This is a little more difficult. On the top end here, or on this, probably the bottom end, not the top end, it's bent from a point just on the other side of the peg there. So that's easy enough to straighten out on the anvil here. The problem though is that at this end, which is the top end, it's actually bent from here. So it's not just a case of flattening it out on an anvil as what I can do there. So the bend actually goes from, let me get this on there, goes from there to there. So somehow I've actually got to hold this and then push this area back up so it's at right angles. So I'll think a bit more about that, just looking at how I might hold this, where I need to hold it and where I need to push it. I guess basically two options. I either hold this section still and push that back, or hold this and push that up. But how to hold this and keep it perfectly still while I'm doing the pushing is the problem, because certainly if I clamp it somehow on this side, it's not a flat area to clamp. I'd have to somehow build this up to be able to clamp it in a vise. Anyway, I'll think a bit more about that. Once I work out how I'm going to do it, then I'll obviously straighten it. So, as I say, this is a little more difficult. the way it's been bent. Anyway, I should be able to solve it, just a case of using a bit of brain power and working out different options and different ways I might be able to do it. I've managed to straighten this out by using the vise. Clamped it in the vise on an angle like that, and then, I don't have the piece here, but with a long piece of steel in on an angle like that, gradually tapped right on the lower edge in here and kept tapping that back, so it brought that from that angle gradually back up. Once I got it up enough, I was then able to use other wider tools in here to gradually straighten. Once it was pretty well back to the vertical, just a case of then putting it on this anvil then and flattening it out. So now both of them are true. So that's solved one major problem with the bracket. Now I have to look at replacing the top end here. I need to look at how much I need to cut off, although I believe I probably shouldn't cut much off at all. In here it's already got a reinforcing section in here as part of the original design. I need to leave that. That gives it strength, because when this goes down that will stop the actual top part of the bracket from flexing. But I do need to somehow straighten this cracked piece up. It's pretty much the same on both. I'll look at some photos of the actual part. I don't know what it looks like on the top. I assume this just goes around, but I'll check that. I'll straighten it across here, or straighten up the rough crack anyway. I may not make it just a straight line. I've got some metalite of the same size I can weld onto that, and I'm going to TIG weld it. I'm not going to use MIG. I think TIG would be better, would be less brittle. I'll, as I say, look at the design of it. I'll probably cut it, I will probably just cut a flat piece of steel to start with, so it may come out oversized, and then I'll shape it to the shape it needs to be. Obviously I need a hole in the middle. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that, whether I drill the hole first and weld the piece on with the hole, or whether I try and drill it afterwards. So I need to think about that as well. Anyway, once again, down to the drawing board, look at various options, and hopefully I can get this back into a complete bracket. I've centralised the bonnet in terms of the bulkhead. There's this pink string line that goes right to the drain in the rear hatch. It's a bit hard to see the thin tension line, but it is straight through. The other cord that's easier to see is the one that's just holding the bonnet from sliding forward while I'm fitting it. But it seems to be sitting central. I've run straight edges along each side of the centre section. They meet equally on the sides of where the drain comes down the front window. So I'm fairly confident that's straight. I've got an equal number of shims in each side at the front, and it seems to be fitting reasonably well at this stage, but it's early days. I've got to put the wings on, and that's going to change some of the positioning, but it's a start, and I'll keep going from there. I've got the bonnet assembled, basically the wings and the centre section, bottom pan there, they're all bolted on. Shims are in place, standard number of shims either side. The fit, I'd say at this stage, is within the ballpark. There would need to be adjustment, but it's reasonably close. But before I address that, I need to address the actual panels on the bonnet itself. I really need to metal finish them. Now, when I did the rust repairs, I did some basic panel repair, particularly on this side where it was stoved in around there. I got it out to its approximate shape. I certainly didn't finish it, but what I intend to do now is to actually finish the panels. The wing on this side, right hand wing, needs quite a bit of finishing to get it fitting and getting the right shape as well as fitting. The centre section also needs metal finishing. A couple of rust repairs I did to that. Needs to be more metal work around those, and also the fit between the centre section and the bulkhead is not correct. I guess not so much the fit but the shape. It sits too high, and the reason for that is that the panel itself is separated from the strengthening piece underneath. So I'll need to screw that down and plug weld it. So that needs to be done as well. The other side, it's not too bad. I need to go over it with a fine tooth comb. Before I do that, I'm going to show how I'm actually going to identify what needs to be actually metal finished. Now, the aim of metal finishing is to get the panel as close as you can to the original shape. Now, what I've done in previous restorations is basically, one, use the hand, and you can feel if there's any imperfections. Another is to use, I've used steel rule to put across a panel to see whether it's straight if it's a straight panel, or flat if it's a flat panel. And to some extent I've been able to do that with a curved panel. In the research I've done on metal finishing, there's a slightly better, well, not a slightly better, I believe it's a much better way to identify imperfections in your panel, particularly on a car like this because of the curves. And basically everything's curved, and it's very hard to determine whether that curve is correct. And you can look at it, you can feel it, to some extent you can identify problems, but the only way to do it properly is to use something called a spline. Now, this is a spline made of a composite material. I've actually got a pack of splines, all different thicknesses and some different lengths. This one's a fairly thick one, and it's not meant for tight curves, it's meant for gradual curves, as on this wing. And what you use this for is to put it on the panel you're checking, get it up on its edge, and if you look, and you won't see this on the camera, but I can see when I look along the edge there, I can see where the spline is making contact with the metal and where it's not. And there's a big gap in here where I can see light under the spline. So, and you can do that further along the panel. Of course, this is flexible. I can pull that down and also identify any imperfections. Now, when I've looked at how these are used, it's basically using that to identify all the imperfections, and it's to try then to get by my metal finishing, hammer, dolly or whatever, to get the panel close so you can't see that light gap, or if you can, it's only minuscule. And any minuscule gaps, they're not so much a gap, but it's probably less than the thickness of a very thin piece of paper. You can do with paint prep, with light fillers, or even just the primers themselves. So on the E Type, I'm going to use splines. Now, in looking at these on the internet and how they're used, basically the commentary is that if you go back to the original concept of cars like this, many cars before they went into production were modelled in clay, and in order to shape the clay, something like this was used, so you could actually go along and shape an entire section, and with the spline you get an even curve. So what I'll be doing is going through each of these panels, including the bonnet. I've got some very thin splines where I can go over the power bulge in the middle and run that down the power bulge and identify any slight depressions, and then address that with hammer, dolly, and maybe even lead wiping if that's necessary. So that's what I'm going to do on this restoration. I thought hard about it, and because there's very little, I don't know whether there is a flat panel as such, maybe flat in one plane but not another, but it's a car that's full of curves, and that's really the beauty of the vehicle itself. So I'll be using splines to identify imperfections, and then using standard metalworking tools to try and address the imperfections that I've found. As I said, I've got to do this right wing. I know it's not the right shape. I can actually see that myself. I can feel it, and in some other areas I think I can feel imperfections as well, but if I can run over with a spline, I'll be able to identify exactly where that is and then gradually address it. So there's a lot of work to do, but I thought that initially get the bonnet together, see how it generally fits. It generally fits okay, but before I try and finalise that and finalise gaps, it's probably not a good idea until you actually address the panel itself and make sure it is the exact shape you want to actually paint. And at the moment, this is not the sort of panel you would paint. As soon as you put paint on this, particularly a dark colour, This will be in British Racing Green. Any imperfections on these curved panels will be seen in the reflections. So it's a case of spending the time to get it right, get the panels close to the shape as you can in metal, and then all you're left with is very minor imperfections which you can pick up, as I say, with primers and whatever. Certainly there's no intention of this vehicle to look at imperfections like that, and maybe a millimetre, that one, it's about a millimetre out, and say, oh, a millimetre, you can fill that with fillet, Bondo or whatever product you want to use, and you probably can, but what I want to do is get it as close as I can to the shape, and then it's just a case of the paint should take care of whatever's left. So that's what I'm about to do. So it's a case of pull this apart again, start to reshape and reassemble, and then once I've got the panels correct, then I'll know that it's just a case of setting this gap. So anyway, that's what I'm about to do.